Well, I wish I could say that it was a good morning. I will wish you good morning, but it is not a good morning. As most of you would have already found out, Val Kilmer passed last night from pneumonia. He was only 65 and didn't even knew that he had been sick, but it didn't seem as if his life was in jeopardy. He had been in remission from cancer, and we all know how horrendous cancer is. I don't know anyone in my circle who hasn't been directly impacted, whether it was a family member suffering in their final days or a very young person going through impossible levels of pain and suffering, and even when they recover, the trauma does not leave. Val was only 65, and he'd always been very quiet and private about his health struggles. And I remember the rumors started to go around more than a decade ago that he had cancer, but he didn't actually ever confirm it. He just didn't want people to know everything about what he was up to, how he was feeling. He just wanted to be kind of left alone, we know now, to try to recover in the relative peace and quiet of somebody who didn't have to work, wanted to continue to work. He had done a one-man Mark Twain stage play when he first started to, he talked about this in the Val documentary, and it was talked about in the documentary by other people close to him, his former wife Joanne Wally, and his daughter. But he didn't want everybody to know what he was up to. And there are areas of life that even if you're a famous celebrity, I've always believed you should be able to keep it to yourself if you so choose. And I certainly wasn't angry, or I never got the sense from the media in this instance in general that they were upset that Val didn't really share what he was going through. He kept saying, I'm okay. He just didn't want people to know. And so when the Val documentary came out, Top Gun Maverick had already, of course, been this enormous hit. It may have still been in theaters now that I'm thinking about it, because the Val documentary was released, I think, in 2021. But the mechanics of what time and the calendar, not really that important. But the Val documentary goes into, it's a fantastic film. It's free with Amazon Prime. There's so much about him. You can be a fan of a celebrity, of a movie star, but it doesn't mean you know that much about them, what makes them tick, etc. And I did not know. First off, I didn't know that he had been accepted to Juilliard at 17. He may have been the youngest person ever accepted to the dramatic acting program. I think that's what it was called. So that was one thing. I had no idea. And the other thing was that he had a brother who was apparently an incredibly talented artist in his own right, who died tragically. Now, I did not know either of those critical components of Val Kilmer's life. And I, kind of humbly apologize, because I'm sure that there are some of you out there that knew both of those things 10, 15 years ago. Val is one of those special people. He is the quintessential Generation X star, meaning he became a star at a time when so many Gen Xers were very young and found ourselves plopped in front of the TV for one reason or another. And people from my generation, we watched Top Secret every time it aired on HBO or Cinemax, or we watched Real Genius again and again. And a big reason of that movie's enduring popularity and success. Yes, Val is great. He's kind of a young Albert Einstein, Marie Curie type of a character. But for most of us, it was our first exposure to Tears for Fears, kind of legendary anthem, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And to go back now, 40 years later, see Val carrying on. Now, this character that he plays, Chris, in the film, is presented as a guy with probably close to a 200 IQ. And to see him sort of cut loose at the end of the movie with popcorn raining down, and it's such another iconic moment. I would argue the first iconic moment of his career is that particular movie, and the way it wraps up with that song playing on the soundtrack. Just amazing. You're not supposed to look like Val Kilmer. I talked about this concept. There are some people where you look at them and the genetics are just like, how is this real? I talked about it with, unfortunately, an even more tragic figure in Christopher Reeve, where you looked at Christopher Reeve in the original Superman and you said, it's as if this guy was somehow created, I don't know if you believe in higher power, he was created for this specific purpose. He looks like the guy in the comics. How is this even possible? Val Kilmer looked like a movie star. And there are people in the movie business who became enormous players in Hollywood and in cinema around the world because they looked the part, literally, figuratively, symbolically. Val Kilmer looked the part, but he was the part. He had the incredible range and the talent to back it up. And his career path was very kind of straightforward and logical, because very few people do what Tom Cruise did. And when I say very few people did what Tom Cruise did, I mean specifically that Tom Cruise first came on the scene in movies such as Taps with, Tim Hutton, who had just come off the Oscar win, or he didn't win. He was nominated for supporting. I don't know if Tim Hutton won for Ordinary People, the Robert Redford film, which got just unbelievable acclaim. Fantastic movie. Shouldn't have beaten Raging Bull, but an incredible movie. But with regards to Tom Cruise, his buddy, his friend, who went to bat for him and refused to do Top Gun Maverick without Val taking part, and they had to figure out how to do it. But Tom Cruise, within 5 years, was real close to the biggest star in Hollywood. That's unusual. Because, for example, Brad Pitt bounced around in movies in the 80s, and then Thelma and Louise. But even then, he didn't really become what you would call a superstar. It took him a little bit of time. Clint Eastwood, it took more than a decade for him to become a major player. In the case of Val Kilmer, it was maybe a little less than 10 years. I mean, he was headlining films sooner, relatively speaking, than you would think. I mean, The Doors is 4 years after Top Gun, and he's headlining a major film many people consider to be in Oliver Stone's top 3. And where was Val's Oscar nomination, by the way? I understand the Oscars are bullshit, it's all political, whatever the phrase, they're all political, whatever that means, because nobody really knows what that means. It's just something that I've been listening to since I'm 8 years old. Well, Chariots of Fire won because the Oscars are political. But wait, they chose a British film, the Motion Picture Academy, which is based in the United States. It won because the Oscars are political? Yeah. Can you explain it? No, it's just that they're political. Okay. But I don't understand where Val's Oscar nomination was for The Doors, but it didn't happen. You look at his other work, though. There are films early in his career, and we're going to define early in his career as before 1995, when he hit all at once. He was everywhere when he got cast in Batman as Michael Keaton's replacement. See, that was something, and there's nothing wrong if people don't know this, if they don't know this particular part of history, because there's recastings, and we see it a lot. There are recastings. It's not always, for anything nefarious, or that an actor is replaced sort of against their will, or a contract isn't renewed. Michael Keaton was supposed to play Batman for the third time, and he allegedly walked off after the first day of filming, or during the first day of filming. The joke was he's not even the star of his own movie, which was true. He's not even the star of his own movie, so to speak. But you look at Val in films that are not entirely successful, such as the movie called Thunderheart, which was 1992. I was still in high school when it came out. It was released in that really amazing from a pop culture, again, Generation X perspective. It came out right around the same time as Wayne's World, Basic Instinct, White Men Can't Jump, My Cousin Vinny, and there were other big movies in the pipeline that were, within a month or so, such as A League of Their Own, and even Lethal Weapon 3 to some extent. But Thunderheart showed that Val was willing to take on a role that would seem to be one kind of role, but it turns into something else. He plays a part Native American investigating a murder on a reservation. And the story, nothing in that film goes the way that you expect. Nothing. Everything is different than what you think it's going to be. And it showed that even as he was climbing the ranks, he was ascending to superstardom. He didn't make safe choices. He was taking risks. He did a film with Kim Basinger called The Real McCoy, not successful. But he was willing to take great character parts, even as the goal is you want to become a leading man and have the sort of career, and you're not going to have the career of a Tom Cruise, but you don't want to just headline a movie. You want to be leading man status for as long as possible. Again, the fantasy, Tom Cruise, Cary Grant, someone of that ilk, where in the case of Cary Grant, he was playing leading man roles for more than 30 years. I mean, that's absurd, but that's what it was. And so when I think about Val's screen persona, the way that he was able to alter his speech patterns, the way he was able to change how he related to the other actors and actresses on screen, it never felt as if anything he did was just a guy picking up a paycheck and reading his lines. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are certain times that even the best are not doing much more than picking up a paycheck. Sometimes it's for a good reason. Tim Robbins making Mission to Mars back in 2000, or even a little bit before that, because he had a film, The Cradle Will Rock, that he wanted to self-finance, and he knew it would be a big paycheck. Well, Val didn't really even do that. Every movie he did, independent or otherwise, there was always, he had to see a through line, and he had to believe that the project was going to be great. He didn't want to just make movies. He didn't have to work. So the thing with people in that business is, in many cases, especially if you ascend to the status that Val did, as I say, early, still very, very young, you don't have to work. You've made enough money where you can be judicious and pick projects carefully. And this was always his process, because he saw himself as an actor first. And when I mentioned about 1995, his kind of, if you want to call it, glory period, where he was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood for a stretch, in 1995, that's when Batman Forever came out. And it's just sometimes these sort of divine providence, if you will, serendipity, is that when something such as a Michael Keaton dropping out, stepping aside, the production was already moving. They needed an actor of stature who was not currently shooting somewhere else, who was going to be tied up for another 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it was. And it just happened to work that Val was available. Now, bear in mind, he had already done Tombstone. Tombstone is a movie that is very well remembered by history, but largely for his incredible performance as Doc Holliday. And I've talked about on the channel, I don't love Tombstone. It's sort of qualifier. I am a big fan of Lawrence Kasdan's Wyatt Earp, which about 60% of that movie is Tombstone. It's the same, the story of the Earps versus the Clanton gang. And I happen to think that Dennis Quaid's performance in Wyatt Earp is incredible. And it doesn't take away from what Val was able to do in Tombstone. But I happen to prefer the movie Wyatt Earp to Tombstone. But many people, not just Gen Xers, you ask them, what's the first thing you think of when you think of Val Kilmer? I'm your Huckleberry. That iconic line reading as he's about to square off with Michael Biehn, another big-time genre actor. He was in Aliens, he was in The Abyss, he was in the original Terminator as Johnny Ringo in Tombstone. That's a kind of legendary movie moment. So Val was already a big star when he slotted into the role of Bruce Wayne, Batman. And Batman Forever, if we're being honest, it's good, but it's not great. And you understand why Val didn't really, he would have come back. There was the issue with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Allegedly, Val had a problem with the fact that Arnold was going to his name was going to be on the poster. Now, nobody knows if this is really true, but supposedly James Cameron wanted to cast Val Kilmer as the T-1000 in Terminator 2. I think I saw this on a documentary, a featurette. It might have actually come up in the Val doc, but on this, I don't remember. I have a really good memory, but there are the occasional gaps. But my memory of this is that Val was up for the T-1000, and Arnold suggested to James Cameron something to the effect of, don't you think it would work better with an unknown actor than someone like Val? Or something along those lines is apparently what happened. And Val didn't appreciate that. Now, if Val Kilmer is the T-1000, the Val Kilmer who had just done The Doors, because that's the time frame we're talking about, it would have been before Tombstone, it would have been before Thunderheart, the movie I just mentioned, The Real McCoy, would have been before all that. I don't think Terminator 2 would have worked as well with Val in that role. And I love the guy. That's just what I've been telling you for the last 15 minutes. But Robert Patrick being cast as the T-1000 was an absolute masterstroke. He really looked the part. And unfortunately, if it's Val Kilmer, we're going to see our identification as Val Kilmer. So despite the success of Batman Forever, Val didn't do a Michael Keaton, so to speak, and drop out during filming. He dropped out ahead of time. And the word was, I don't think the word was at the time, but the word was that he really didn't want to work with Arnold. Another story from the time frame had nothing to do with the Terminator 2 angle, but that he didn't appreciate that Arnold was making more money than him, and he basically said, fuck this. Now, nobody's ever going to know for sure. Somebody might come out, maybe his daughter, or somebody connected to him might say, no, he really was upset with Arnold about the Terminator 2 thing because he really thought he would have been great. Something like that. But even there, Val, it wasn't enough to just pick up a paycheck. He wanted the work to mean something. There's also a version of The Matrix, or a version of this story, where Val Kilmer thought the script for Batman and Robin was a piece of crap and got himself out of it through other means. Because that does happen. Not everybody is upfront about these things because they don't want to burn bridges. I'll give you an example. When Jodie Foster did not return as Clarice Starling for Hannibal, I don't think that she came out and said, I hated this book, or I thought the script was terrible. But the implication was she didn't want to just make a movie starring as Clarice if she didn't believe in the project. So there is a version of this where Val thought the Batman and Robin script was terrible, and he would ultimately be doing himself a favor if he didn't take part in that catastrophe. But Batman Forever is one of the handful of movies starring Val Kilmer where if I'm asked a question, if it's a young person who knows the name, and maybe the only film you've ever seen Val Kilmer in was Top Gun Maverick, and you understand, okay, he was a star and his health is bad and his throat, he can't really speak, but what are some Val Kilmer movies to help me to understand why this guy meant so much, especially to Generation Xers, but also elder millennials and certainly young boomers. And of course I forgot Willow, the Ron Howard film, the George Lucas story, a movie that I had not seen. That's 1988. I had not seen in full. I saw pieces of it about 20 times, circa 1990, but I never actually sat down and watched the whole thing. And not surprisingly, Val Kilmer is the movie. He's the movie. He's the one he's driving the bus. He's the one who makes that movie work as well as it does. But in 95, he has Batman Forever, an enormous, just impossible box office hit. I think it was the biggest hit of the year next to Toy Story, but by worldwide gross, it probably would have cracked $1 billion. And there was the cross promotion, which now it would be kind of spoofed and lampooned. Joel Schumacher, the late Joel Schumacher, the filmmaker, he found a song by Seal, which had not been a hit in its first go-round. I don't think it really made any impression at all. And he found a song called Kiss from a Rose. And before you know it, that song was everywhere, just like Val Kilmer was about to be everywhere. They did this sort of tie-in where they had a music video and, Val Kilmer's Batman seeming to interact with Seal during the music video. Great stuff. Speaking of Arnold, they did that with You Could Be Mine and Guns N' Roses, where Arnold actually is a significant supporting character in Guns N' Roses' music video for that song. But Batman Forever, an enormous success. But artistically, Val doesn't get to do that much. But it is a perfect movie star performance. And it's one of those that I would recommend, especially if you're a fan of the series, whether it's Robert Pattinson or Christian Bale, you like the character. Val's interpretation of the role, it's not great, only because the script is not great. It's not really about character. You don't get to know anything about Bruce Wayne. Your prior identification with the Michael Keaton character, basically, is what you have to go on in Batman Forever. But later in the year, he's in Heat, which many would argue is the single best film of Val Kilmer's career. And in Heat, it's a supporting role. It's, Bobby D and Al Pacino. It's their movie. But Kilmer registers very strongly. And he wanted so badly to be in that movie that not only did he take less money, but it was supposed to be in his contract after Batman Forever that his name is going to be above the titles. He didn't stand on ceremony with that. He was okay with his name not being above the titles. He was so desperate to work with Michael Mann and work with De Niro and Pacino. And he worked really well. He doesn't have any, I don't think he has any interaction with Pacino at all in the world of that movie. But his scenes with De Niro, his scenes with Ashley Judd, who was very young at the time, and Tom Sizemore, really, really good. And his character goes through a lot of different kind of emotional highs and lows in the world of that film, where we're led to believe his character of Chris is a bit of a train wreck as a person, but he's not necessarily a terrible guy, as Ashley Judd's character is not really a bad person. Sometimes circumstances compel you to act badly, but I see Chris as a more sympathetic figure than, for example, the Tom Sizemore character in that film. And it's neither here nor there, but it's a performance where Val could have just coasted on his looks, had the blonde locks for that film, but he really doesn't. And something he was very good at was registering pain, just using his face and body language in a way that was very believable. And he did that to even greater effect in a film that I actually talked about on the channel, as far as if I'm asked to name one Val Kilmer film and performance to sum up why did he become who he became, I'm going to say The Saint, which was 1997, after the enormous successes of Batman Forever commercially and the incredible success of Heat, both critically and commercially. Val then, unfortunately, his career immediately dipped because he did The Ghost and the Darkness, which was not good. It was not good. And it's unfortunate because it was a good story. It was a great true story. And Val got into that mostly because, not just that he was available, but because Batman Forever was about to land. And here you go. Here comes Val Kilmer to star. And they make that movie with Michael Douglas, and he and Michael Douglas became, very good friends after that. Film is, I think it's okay, but it bombed, and critics mostly savaged it. Roger Ebert, who was a big Val Kilmer fan, he hated it. And there's a certain irony that in the case of Roger Ebert, it was jaw and mouth cancer that unfortunately contributed to him not living nearly as long, and the last 10 plus years of his life being very, very difficult. But the dual disasters in 96 after the incredible year that Val had in 95, The Island of Dr. Moreau, where he worked with Brando, and he had dreamed of working with Brando, but it ended up being just a complete disaster. It was a clusterfuck. Sorry, just going to adjust the car. It was a clusterfuck because nobody wanted to be there. And there are times where for reality's sake, you have films shot on a location. Film shot on a location where you say to yourself, they should have made this movie on a soundstage. I don't get why they're shooting it here. This doesn't really make any sense. And the cast and crew, Island of Dr. Moreau, everyone was so uncomfortable because they're in the middle of fucking jungle, and they got dengue fever, they got typhus, everyone's getting sick, everyone's miserable, the food is terrible, the water is no good, everything is bad. Like literally everything is bad. And the reason why Val wanted to do that was because he wanted to work with Brando, and he was hoping to bond with Brando. And when he realized that he was not going to be able to bond with Brando, that they weren't going to have even enough scenes together, he was devastated. And he started causing problems on that set. And this is talked about in the Val documentary where he takes responsibility. What happened was, specifically, the original filmmaker, Richard Stanley, was replaced by a guy I love as a filmmaker, John Frankenheimer, and Kilmer clashed with Frankenheimer. And it's embarrassing to say that they nearly came to blows, but the story goes that they nearly came to blows. Unfortunately, they didn't. And then Val, after the two failures of 96, he did The Saint, a movie that is pretty well remembered by history, but more because Val was still really young. He was in, prime of his leading man era, and the film was a box office success. His career never really stayed at that level. Like, that was the last film which was financially successful, where he is basically playing an alpha type character. And, he continued to do good work. He did a film, an independent film, which was very good, called The Salton Sea. And then in the middle 2000s, working with Robert Downey Jr. in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He has an interesting role with Denzel in the film. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was the film with the science fiction element where Denzel's character could see the future. I don't remember the name of the film, but it wasn't great, but it was a sort of juicy role for Val in that movie. But he stayed busy. He wasn't somebody who liked to sit on his hands, and working on independent films such as I say, The Salton Sea, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, it kept him active. It kept him engaged. And, he was always going to march to his own tune, deciding to do the Mark Twain, one-man stage play and take it around the country. And with the big mustache and with the hair, kind of looked like Mark Twain. They really, and having to go into hair and makeup every day, that couldn't have been easy. But for many people, the last memories of him are Top Gun Maverick, and good on Tom Cruise for only wanting to make the film if Val could be part of it. And he knew that they would be able to figure out a way. But how they worked Tom Kazansky, based on everything we know of that character of Iceman, obviously the original Top Gun 1986, you could be my wingman, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, all that great stuff. But the way they worked the character in, not just into the story, but that he was a commander of the Pacific Fleet, it makes perfect sense. Because unlike Tom Cruise's Maverick, Pete Mitchell, Tom Kazansky was a company man. He was a guy who was going to follow orders. He was not a maverick. He's a team player. And that was obviously a major source of the drama in the first film, which is that Kazansky knows that Mitchell's a good pilot, but he's not safe up there. He takes too many unnecessary risks. And the way that his character is presented in Top Gun Maverick, and the way that Val comes across in his scenes, the last scene he has with Cruise, it's beautiful. It's sad, and it's even sadder today, but there is a poetry to it, and nothing in that movie feels forced. I think it's way better than the first one, for whatever that's worth. Anyway, I could talk about this guy for a couple of hours. I'm going to end the episode here. I'm really saddened to get the news that he's gone. I'm sorry. I guess I was hoping for a miracle. I was hoping that with the advances in technology that somehow, because I didn't know that he was, we knew that he wasn't in great health, but there's a difference between saying a guy can't speak and a guy is dying. And I did not know that his health was in jeopardy to the level where his life was at risk if he developed pneumonia, as what they're saying happened this time. So rest in peace, just 65 years old, to one of my favorite people to ever work in the movie business, a galvanizing force on screen, an amazing talent, gone too soon at 65, Val Kilmer. This has been episode 489 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I really hate that I had to even do this episode and even talk about somebody who I hoped had another 20 years. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, if you enjoy it, click like and subscribe. You know what? I'm going to stop all the promotional shit. You don't need to hear anymore. If you liked it, I'm just really sad this morning, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Take care.